Harry Brailsford here for M365 Nation at the IBM Think Show in San Francisco, February 2019, and I'm with an industry legend, a friend of mine, Frank Olhurst. Frank, you run in a couple of different crowds, but this is for the audience surrounding Microsoft 365. So quickly introduce yourself, and then I want to talk about topics you would like to talk about.
Very good, very good. Hi, for those who don't know who I am, I'm Frank Olhurst. I'm an industry analyst and a journalist that's written for many of the B2B publications. I ran the CRN Test Center for a number of years. I ran eWeek Labs for a while. Was an executive editor over at eWeek. I was the CTO over at CRN. And currently I contribute to a bunch of different publications, and I also write technology books. One of my latest has been on big data. And I'm currently contributing to some Informa publications, such as Channel Partners, Channel Futures, MSP Mentor, including the VAR Guy, elements like that. All of these publications that are rolled up under that brand. And I still also contribute to eWeek regularly, doing both product reviews and analysis on products. But my focus as of late has been very much on the cloud and cloud technologies, along with cybersecurity, covering that very, very extensively. So that's who I am.
Well, and that's what we want to talk about, because right now our pillar conversation at Microsoft 365 Nation surrounds security, and we'll talk later on about other areas we plan to cover in the future. But I think you had a wrap coming out of the IBM Think Conference on quantum computing and security and words I can't pronounce. What's your story?
Well, there's this concept, and this is something that's been spoken about by a few of the certificate vendors out there, like DigiCert and whatnot. This concept of post-quantum decryption. And what that really means is that, we're on the horizon of quantum computing becoming a reality. Now, the power behind quantum computing is many factors, exponentially more powerful than the supercomputers of today. And the idea here is that, a quantum computer can break the traditional, RSA type encryption, that type of...
They told me it'd never happen.
Yeah, they claim it would never happen, even though it's up to, 128 bits and, your SSL and your PKI and all that, all these levels of encryption can be broken in a matter of minutes with a quantum computer. Now, again, this is all theory because we don't have real quantum computers yet. So the industry is striving towards this ideology of post-quantum encryption, meaning creating encryption that cannot be broken by quantum computing techniques. And that means moving to a different type of math.
Right, not so a different paradigm.
A different paradigm.
Right.
Now, realistically, we're talking, 5-10 years down the pike of this being a threat. But if people remember, the permanence of data nowadays, you store data for 20 years. You store data, longer than that. Now, that data, let's say you've archived it, is still accessible, and you've used an older style of encryption. And let's say that data has intellectual property on it. In a world of quantum computing, anyone will be able to eventually break in and get that data. So that means we have to be thinking, today about what this quantum computing capabilities mean in a few years. Because there's another factor that goes on as well. With everything happening online and encrypted transactions going across the wire, there's nothing stopping folks from eavesdropping on that data and recording that data and then waiting until they have the capability to break encryption.
Didn't think of it that way.
So, let's say you're a defense contractor and you're sending plans over the wire and you have it heavily encrypted, the best FIPS encryption going and all that. So you're meeting, the requirements set forth by, whatever agency is employing you. And, that's all copacetic and good and everything.
Yeah.
Somebody intercepts and eavesdrops in that traffic and records it, and then 5-10 years from now applies a quantum methodology to decrypt it. Now, that intellectual property that's been sent still might have immense value. Mm-hmm. It might have immense value 30 years from now. I mean, if you even think of it from, the aeronautical industry.
Good, because I was going to say the National Enquirer, but let's stick to aeronautics.
The aeronautical industry. The air intakes on the Concorde are still classified, the design around that.
Okay.
So, and you're talking a very old design, and that's still classified and protected, which was a commercial aircraft.
Right.
Imagine, when it comes to military or medical or things like that.
Yeah.
So, we have to start looking towards this, these capabilities of post-quantum encryption, meaning using new types of encryption that cannot be broken by quantum computers. A lot of the certificate authorities are working on the ideology, but we also have to think of it in reference to the past as well. Your archive data, will you have to re-encrypt that, or do you need to move that into a situation where it is no longer accessible? It's in cold storage. That might be difficult in a world of big data analytics, where you want to keep everything in that data lake accessible because, impressions from 5 years ago might still have relevance today. So that's one of the big elements that I think we need to be talking about when it comes to security. Other elements when it comes to security is, better ways to deploy endpoint protection. And endpoint has now grown into anything that connects to anything. IoT is now an endpoint even. Servers are an endpoint. So what we have to do is look at, how lateral attacks move on those devices, how those devices can be usurped, or even how ransomware can mitigate across the network. And one of the ways to look at what any type of malicious software or firmware does, the only way it can really do damage is if it's able to write to a register, write to the disk, or write into memory. Mm-hmm. If you're able to isolate all of those writes and hide that isolation from the ransomware, you might be able to readily prevent ransomware or malware from spreading, because you've taken away its way to deliver a payload. Now, that said, and now that I've mentioned that, I'm sure someone will come up with another way.
Bad guys are always half a step ahead. Well, I'll tell you what, before we wrap up this segment on Microsoft 365 Nation, let's talk a little bit of roadmap and a couple of thoughts. One is we have launched a community with experts and enthusiasts, and we're also underwritten by what I like to say is well-behaved and trained sponsors to underwrite our efforts, community sponsors. And so some of the things you're talking about, one of those entities is Fortinet, and they are just down the road from San Fran down in South Bay, and they have, boy, if they're anything, they're an engineering and a research firm first. No question about it. They have a wall of fame of patents. That's real different than companies that have a wall of fame of marketing awards, right? It just shows their DNA. So, I just wanted to let the community know that we have like-minded underwriters engaging in these kind of conversations. Number two, you have some good ideas as we look a little more forward on our roadmap, because we want to initially stick to the knitting and do what we do best with Microsoft 365 Nation, because Microsoft 365 is a big product stack. And so, yes, we're going to talk desktop. Yes, we're going to talk Win 7, EOS, well. We're going to have some future conversations. But you had a really good idea that there's a conversation on SharePoint. Give us maybe the fastest 2 minutes in sports on that and why that might fit.
Well, what we've seen is SharePoint has been a tool that's been around for quite a while, and it's been used as this collaboration, document control,
We're a publisher.
even intranet support type of solution. Now, SharePoint has evolved over the years, and now you've got the concept of SharePoint Online, where you no longer have to have your SharePoint server,
Right.
on premise, and it offers a lot of interesting features. Yet, in that transition to that online entity of SharePoint, some of the concepts and feature sets have changed. Now, let's take a look at SharePoint Online, and let's say that you want to set up a document repository that you want to be able to share documents, check in and check out documents, and establish, let's say, a library of knowledge, whether it's intellectual property or marketing data or anything like that. There seems to be kind of this disconnect between when you're using the implementation of Word that's online and the latest version of Word on the desktop when it comes to filling out metadata forms and having it all work together. Now, when you look at it from that point of view, there are solutions out there, but it requires such an effort to find the solutions.
Yeah.
Now, what I was talking to Harry about is that building a community where we could share these solutions outside of the dictated Microsoft way of doing things. And then also talk about the add-ons, not only to SharePoint but other Office 365 products, and then the integration of other elements that whether it's Teams and things like that Office 365 is now bringing to the small, medium, and large enterprise. There's a wealth of productivity just within hand's reach that people don't know how to get to at this point in time. So looking at it from an issue of pain point resolution, that you want to use this wonderful product and you've got this idea of this unique way to address a business process or need that drives business, and you wrap your arms around SharePoint and Teams and these other things, and you come to a point in time where you kind of hit this what we used to call back in the days of programming a brick wall that you can't ride around.
I'll probably hit overwhelmingness before I hit a brick wall. But go on.
And to bring forth a community that can help solve those things, and also, provide the knowledge and kind of the thought leadership to avoid those problems to begin with, might be a very good direction for, Harry's introduction here to go into.
And maybe I'll kind of wrap on this, is that so at SMB Nation and my other entities, M365 Nation and so on, we still use SharePoint. We use the online version, and the reason is I came up through the publishing ranks, as did yourself, and I really it's a low cost, no cost version control system with document management, and the way that plays out in my world, the traditional small business world, is not rewriting a chapter over a weekend. I mean, dude, it has happened. and it's happened in a couple ways. You lost some data. Number two, someone else was working on the same document simultaneously, and you get out of sync, and you go, okay, we got to roll back. And SharePoint still has a place in my heart. So, well, I'll tell you what, I know the lectures have started here at IBM Think. It's Wednesday in mid-February. We're in San Francisco. So, Frank, as always, thanks for your time, and we'll see you up on the boards.
Yep, great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.